Hello everyone, welcome to part 2. I'm really sorry we got cut off. We are back now live. We were discussing why is Brazil in the United Nations at all. Talk less about the Security Council. I read some secondary sources and we discussed racism, what they call cordial racism. Prior to that, we discussed the natives' pledge for survival in a society then that has a lot to say and a lot to answer at the international level, and yet is leading the United Nations at the highest level of the Security Council, and producing drafts and resolution drafts for humanitarian purposes. What should we say? I gave the example of this Caroline, it has an Italian name, I can't remember, that has the name of the Italian Nazis that fled from Italy to Brazil. And her picture the picture of her holding an assault rifle and talking about bloodbaths of the indigenous populations shows a lot of the same greed that Nazis exhibited to steal what is of others and the most vulnerable others by the law of the bullet. And we know so many cases of people who had their family jewelry stolen, who had their identity stolen, who had to wear black and had to undergo all kinds of traumas and had to surrender their savings, etc., because for the Nazis was never enough. But the reality of the fact is that Italy at the time wasn't managing the country's resources at all. I mean, Italy has lots of sea. If they wanted to live well like the United States, they could. They just had to sell the fish. The same goes to say for the countries. So why did Italy behave like they did in that time? And why does now Italy has not this government, but inherited so many sad contracts with countries like China? We don't know this situation, but when the roots of the situation, but when you hear about the way they handled COVID-19 and the way they promoted, the local councils promote hug a Chinese person to avoid discrimination, and later most people start dying in those communities. You kind of think, oh, they handled the issue COVID-19 wrongly. Why? I would say they handled the issue race wrongly, because had they any common sense, they wouldn't be looking at the Chinese people, and they would be looking at the sausages and chorizos they were importing from China that were killing people and killed people in Iran. So you would have to think that the African pig swine was the most important issue to deal with at the time than talking about racism. But in Brazil, this politician and many others behaving like complete Nazis and getting away with it is a reminder that United Nations might publish all those fancy documents, but is not perfect. And is also a reminder we have to look at ourselves and say, are we perfect or are we not perfect? I gave you the example of what happened to me in the Portuguese consulate, and I told you that is often not the country, but the person's origins, where those people come from. And they might have, for example, Portuguese name, and they smile and you see those short roots, and you know that you know what, they are second, third generation bleach, so you're not surprised they're shouting and mistreating people in the Portuguese consulate. I use that example, my personal example, to make a comparison to the Nazism that's happening now in Brazil, and to the incident where more people recently this month were shot and burnt alive than the Israelis in Gaza, and yet they were not on the news, and the Brazilians were protesting, getting themselves arrested, protesting for Palestine and against Israel. So I made a parallelism, and I questioned, why are we ignoring the realities of the world? And most importantly, why do we still look at the United Nations as a leader in human rights? And how dangerous it is for African countries and other vulnerable countries to have Brazilian military, Brazilian officials, Brazilian organizations in their countries. I think is dangerous. I'll tell you what, because that woman with the gun, that politician I mentioned to you, that Brazilian politician, is ransacking the natives, the Native Latin Americans. He's killing them, he's promoting the genocide for money. And people like that, they do a lot of things for money. And right now having them in Africa, where all the gold is bad for humanity. And to this I take you to DRC, because on the 17th of October, a paper was published by the Security Council, a Security Council report about the Great Lakes region. And this is not just about this region in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Do you know why? Because who is in there, in that area and other points of Africa, representing the United Nations and other peace organizations, is Brazilians. And you have to question how sad it is that the African Union does nothing, that the African Union does not look at their friends, at who they let in, and takes action. Because, you know something, people have to get tired and say, if this is happening, how can these people stop the number of refugees, African refugees, getting into Europe, if the people who are in there are not capable? Just look at how they manage their very rich, resourceful country. Do you think that Polish people or Russian people or Eastern European people would be poor like they are if they lived in Brazil, if Brazil was their country, with the mines, with the forests, with everything? Do you think that Brazil would be Russia? Just look how Russia have this multi-diverse society, and natives, the natives in the Alaska neighboring country of Russia, is treated and respected and preserved in comparison to Brazil. So why is Brazil in the United Nations? Why is Brazil in Africa? You know, why? The country leading, the second leading country in tourism, prostitution tourism, in abuse, the country where women are known to go and get children for their men and whatever to sleep with, the country where people drive and children will be selling themselves on the street, they don't bat an eye, the country that all the reports claim they are extremely racist, cordial racism. Why this country be leading the Security Council and the reports and the humanitarian work documents for Israel, Palestine, and any other country? It doesn't make sense. And considering now, let's focus a bit on DRC. Why would this be happening? Because DRC has the rubber and everything that not only the European Union needs for space development, but to make phones as well, and the Brazilians are there. And with this I take you to this briefing that will give you an idea of what is going on in the Great Lakes region. I'll now read this, and it was posted by the Security Council on the 16th of October. On the 17th, tomorrow morning, the 17th of October, the Security Council will hold a briefing and consultations on the Great Lakes region. Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Great Lakes region, Wang Chai, will brief on the Secretary General's latest semi-annual report on the implementation of the 2013 Peace, Security and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the region, PSCF, which covers the period from 16th of March to 15th September. A civil society representative is also expected to brief. Several regional countries may participate at tomorrow's meeting under Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure. SIA is likely to SIA, so should I read Zaya, is likely to focus on the deteriorating security situation in eastern DRC and the tensions between the DRC and Rwanda. Kinshasa continues to accuse Kigali of supporting the armed group Mouvement du Mar, while Rwanda accuses the DRC of supporting the Force Démocratique de Libération du Rwanda, an ethnic Hutu armed group active in eastern DRC. The Secretary General's report welcomes the decrease in cross-border incidents between the two countries, but mentions one incident on the 27th of July, which resulted in the killing of a Rwandan soldier. In a 16th of October presidential statement on the DRC, reference SPRST 2023-5, the Security Council called for calm and for increased dialogue between DRC and Rwanda in furtherance of durable peace in the region. Although a fragile cessation of hostilities agreement between the M23 and the Congolese Armed Forces FARDC still holds, the Secretary General's report refers to increasing clashes between the M23 and other armed groups, including the FDLR and Wazalendo, a local militia group that is illegally operating as a FARDC reserve force. These clashes have escalated recently, with the M23 accusing the Burundian contingent of the East African Community Regional Force, which is deployed in eastern DRC as part of a regional initiative under the auspices of the East African Community EAC, known as the Nairobi Process, of supporting these armed groups and militias. In a 12th of October press statement, the EAC expressed serious concern about the escalating violence but denied the claims about the EACRF's conduct. Other armed groups in eastern DRC, including ISIS, the Islamic State in Iraq, and the Levant ISIL-affiliated group, the Allied Democratic Forces ADF, have also continued to pose serious threats to security in the region. The Secretary General's report refers to a 2nd June report of the group of experts assisting the 1533 DRC Sanctions Committee, which described the support that the ADF receives from ISIL cells in South Africa. Despite ongoing joint military operations by Congolese and Ugandan armed forces against the group, ADF attacks against civilians continue unabated. A 17th of June attack by the group targeting a school in Uganda, claimed the lives of 42 people, most of whom were students, and injured 6 others. On 13th of October, the ADF reportedly conducted another cross-border attack in western Uganda, killing 1 person and injuring another. At tomorrow's meeting, Zaya is likely to reiterate the need for all Congolese and foreign armed groups to lay down their arms unconditionally and to engage in the disarmament, mobilization, community recovery and stabilization program. I'm going to stop here. Do you know why I'm reading this? Because when the situation was manageable, the local DRC people kept saying that between them and their resources, there was only the Brazilian United Nations military depot in and out, that nobody could have got through their resources going through them. So those groups that got in that area had to have access with or through the Brazilian Forces, United Nations people who are supposed there to give peace. And now you're talking about resources that are a lot of money, that they have interest for Europe, security interest, space, mines, rubber to make space products, mines, everything. And this situation and this illustrated in these locals stating that they could only have gone through the Brazilians, United Nations Brazil, is in several documentaries. Several channels international channels cover this issue. So we have to ask, how did they get through, these terrorists got through the resources, if they could have only got through the United Nations Brazilian people in there? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that the African Union does not know their history, that Africans don't know their history, and are giving these Brazilians a foot in Africa. It's embarrassing. You are going to say that these people are not the same people as this politician who's advocating for bloodbaths of the indigenous people in Brazil. They're the same people. So what the hell are they doing in here, in Africa, under the United Nations auspices? I'm going to keep reading here, but I'm going to jump to get to the bit that's really, really hot and makes you question, what is NATO doing? Council members have been expressing concern about the role of illicit exploitation of and trade in natural resources as a driver of conflict in the DRC and the region. They support the implementation of the United Nations Strategy for Peace Consolidation, Conflict Prevention and Conflict Resolution in the Great Lakes region. One of the strategy's key priorities is promoting sustainable and transparent management of natural resources, as well as trade and investment. Now I'm going to get to the interest part. Wait for it. At tomorrow's meeting, Zaya may highlight the work that his office has done to encourage responsible investment in the mining sector, taking into account the increasing demand for critical minerals, particularly those used to fuel battery and electric vehicles. I'm going to repeat this. Taking into account the increasing demand for critical minerals, particularly those used to fuel battery and electric vehicles, to spur structural economic transformation in the region. To provide a sustainable solution to responsible artisanal gold trade in the region. Are you kidding me? And now they are talking here, look, France and the US have been vocal on this issue, and other members have also referenced it, In August, the US announced its decision to impose sanctions on 6 individuals, and the US jointly proposed designating one individual belonging to the M23 and another belonging to the FDLR, associated with ISIS, under the 1533 DRC sanctions regime. Human rights. They're talking about human rights. And only 2 sentences dedicated to how this area is vital in fuel, battery and electric vehicles. And you let Brazilians in there. I don't care if they're in the United Nations. The African Union and Africans should be embarrassed of themselves. The amount of Africans that went to slaves to Brazil. And you let these I don't even want to say, these people who can't even manage their country, they have lots of gold in there that they don't properly explore. They have sea. Brazil could be a superpower federal state like the United States. They can't manage themselves. Brazilians cannot manage themselves. They can't. Why are they in Africa? Why are they in the United Nations writing humanitarian aid drafts for Palestine and Israel? Why are they being left near hot areas of Sudan, hot areas of DRC, with minerals that are vital for science development and space science development of Europe? Security matters vital security matters, vital car production, batteries and tablets and electric devices matters. And now no wonder you have ISIS there. With the local population saying they could not have gone through the resources through them, they had to go through the Brazilian military United Nations vehicles. Why haven't anyone kicked them out of the United Nations or kicked them out of Africa? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Such a rich country, so many women, Brazilian women, being trafficked to Europe for prostitution. Brazilian government is pathetic. They have so much and they can't. They just steal, these politicians just steal and run away. They're corrupt. They're pedophiles to the core. They destroy their own country. Get them out of the United Nations. Get them out of Africa. The United Nations does not need Brazilians. It's giving them a bad name. If they cannot even look their citizens, they can't even look after their citizens in Britain. Brazilian women going missing, turning up shop dead. And now they are in Africa. It's ridiculous. What kind of ferment is this, having a country like Brazil in the presidency of the United Nations Security Council? Kind of hypocrisy, kind of discussing world how we are living, that the indigenous in Brazil don't matter. Ask yourself, is it fair for the indigenous in Brazil? Is it fair for the African descent and mixed race in Brazil to being referred to as being victims of genocide? And then you have them doing humanitarian resolutions. You want to boycott Palestine, you want to boycott Israel, and you have Brazil leading the Kabbalah. Let's think here. What is going on? United Nations. I'm asking African Union, where is your dignity? African Union countries, where is your self-respect? Have a bit of self-pride for once. Thank you for listening to this podcast, part 2 of Erin Brito podcast, asking why is Brazil in the United Nations, especially at the level of the presidency of the United Nations Security Council. Have a fantastic evening. Bye-bye.